As has been the case since the pandemic, we weren't able to bring the House leaders together as the Senate leaders were on this show last month, with Speaker Jason Stephens in particular wanting a one-on-one conversation. I spoke to Stephens this week as he ends his term as Speaker. When you look back on your 2 years as Speaker, how do you feel like it went for you?
Yeah, I actually thought it went really well, and a lot of those priorities. So, for example, House Bill 1, there were a lot of concepts in House Bill 1 that were in the operating budget. The income tax, the flat income tax, we almost got there. We're to 2 brackets now. We were able to finally get an inflation adjustment for the homestead exemption, on the property tax front. And a lot of the reason for House Bill 1 was to start the discussion on property taxes. Now, mind you, this was 2 years ago, and being a former county auditor, I could see what was coming. And a lot of it was just getting people to understand how complex our property tax system is in Ohio. And it's not an easy fix like with the sales tax or the income tax, which you just change a number here or there or move the brackets around a little bit. Property taxes are just a very complex item that when you cut them, somebody loses out. And it's a very direct equation there, but very complex. So, I felt like we did good on the economic front. Some of our other priority bills was the adoption bill, House Bill 5, House Bill 7 we got, which was our mamas and babies bill. We were able to do that. But our focus was really about the people and the people of Ohio. And I think we were able to focus on that and get a lot of those types of things passed into law over the past 2 years.
Let's go back to the last night of Lame Duck. You had told reporters that you were hopeful that we would be done by dinner.
Yeah, I ate dinner late.
That's not what happened.
We were close.
The 2 holdups appear to be the pay raise and also House Bill 8 and the changes from the Senate. Am I correct in saying those were the holdups?
I don't know that there were the holdups. The thing that took the longest was the volume of bills. If you look at what were on the agendas, the Senate passed House bills, we passed Senate bills. Then we concurred on what we had passed to each other. So some of it was the discussions on what exactly is in this bill. The Senate did the same to us. And then really we were done by 11 o'clock as far as having an agreement because that day the conference committee had met throughout the day on House Bill 315. And
that was the Christmas tree bill.
And that was, yes. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is waiting on our friends at LSC to actually compile the bill took about 3 hours, or otherwise, we may not have been done by dinner, but we at least been able to, be done before the news was over.
So the pay raise was not the holdup necessarily?
Oh, no. It was really just the volume of a lot of those different bills that were coming together and being rolled in and rolled out and all that.
There were some bills that didn't pass. For instance, changes to recreational marijuana and also Delta 8, which Governor Mike DeWine has said he wants. Right. Senate Bill 83, the higher education bill. What happened with those 2 things? Were you ready to move on either of those?
Yeah, so the recreational marijuana, I think, I'm not an expert on marijuana, but I'm an expert on voters and their voices. And I think, the voters spoke loud and clear back in November of 2023. And I felt it was very important that we have a consensus and a bipartisan consensus on what any modifications to that law would be. And the challenge is once you would get, in the House, there's 99 people, so it's hard to get 50 people to agree on a big consensus bill. And when you would do one change here on one particular item, you might gain 30 votes, but you might lose 25 on the other side who didn't want to do that. And, we have some members who were, and this is just in the Republican caucus, who were very much pro-issue 2. We had some who were very anti-issue 2. I didn't vote for it, but they also didn't even want to vote on it again. So they were a no regardless of what came through. So it made the math challenging, and I know we had a lot of different folks working on that. And sometimes, and this is, part of term limits maybe when you have members who haven't been here very long, they're a little more suspicious of what all is coming through. And it makes those bigger compiled bills that kind of move back and forth a little more challenging to get to the votes on it. So,
did you block Senate Bill 83?
No, I think it was a matter of a bill that was, didn't have the votes in our caucus. And part of the reason I think it was very very mandate oriented. It was very particular. I mean, it was going in and saying universities had to, within 3 clicks, get to the syllabus. I mean, it was very particular on that. There were some other, carve outs for some special interests that didn't really, in my opinion, need to be in there. And, there was enough, and it was interesting, even within our caucus, ideologically, whether you're a little more conservative or whatever, there just wasn't the support for it. So.
You mentioned this in our discussion earlier about House Bill 1, but there were a lot of property tax reform bills that were proposed, but no big ones got through. Do you expect that to change? And is there a reason that some of these didn't get through at all?
Yeah, so property taxes, they are complex, but there's 3 basic pillars to property taxes. There is the local entity who receives the taxes, your schools, fire departments, libraries, whatever. There is the property taxpayer, which is anybody who owns property or rents property. They pay those taxes, and those taxes never leave the county line. They go to the county courthouse, you pay the treasurer, the county auditor distributes the checks. The reason that there are less property taxes, and the thing is those voters who live in that district have voted for those taxes. The way that goes lower is when the state comes in and pays and subsidizes some of those taxes, whether it's the homestead exemption, the 10% rollback, or whatever has been done over the last 100 years of incentives or whatnot. And so whenever you take and say, I want to lower people's property taxes, well, all of a sudden the schools are not getting as much money. And or the state is coming in and lowering the property taxes for the people who have voted for them. So, the economic principle of if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. So if you subsidize property taxes, the chances of more levies passing goes up. So it makes for a very challenging math situation. And math in property taxes is the number one thing, even though the politics are, challenging. It's really interesting. So we'll see what happens in the next GA, and it's understanding that when you lower a property taxpayer, somewhere else is either going to get less money or the state is going to have to raise taxes somewhere else in order to subsidize that. So it's a real math challenge.
I know there was a flurry of bills that passed in lame duck, like 4 dozen bills that passed.
Right.
So pushing back on the idea of whether this was a productive legislature or not, because earlier it had been described as one of the most unproductive in half a century.
Right.
I want to ask you if that was specifically related to the split that was happening between the House and the Senate, between you and Senate President Matt Huffman.
Yeah, I don't know what the real reason. I'm sure it's in the eye of the beholder on what was causing what. But when you look at probably the amount of pages that the revised code was revised during this GA, I think you'll probably see a pretty comparable thing. But as far as different bills, some of them more complex, take a little longer to get through the process, whether it's more hearings or more being done. But I look at a lot of the things that were not done when the GA started. The Department of Education, for example, was not done, and we got that done right in the budget. One of the important things, was the men and women's sports bill was not done. Neither was, some of the other things, but we were able to get a lot of those done within the budget. And so I feel like we've been very successful. We were able to have the largest transportation budget done on time. The budget was done on time. The largest capital budget with the one-time money on top of it that the state has ever seen. But we also did those efficiently. It wasn't boring. There were things for you guys to write about and discussions. But at the same time, from an efficient standpoint, I felt like we did a really good job with that. And also, I'm of the mindset that it's okay if the legislature isn't in every single thing in our lives. So.
The split amongst the Republicans in the House, was that part of keeping some of these things moving forward? How frustrating was that to deal with?
No, I mean, it wasn't. I don't know that frustrating was the word. When you look at the folks, who 2 years ago supported me. It were people like Bill Seitz and Scott Olslager and Tom Patton. I mean, these are folks who are legendary legislators. They've been on both sides, and they understood how important it was to make the trains run on time and to make sure that committees were meeting and that we had good common sense as far as just making sure that, you have staff that are supported and supportive. And, when I look back and see that, we were able to navigate, You know, it's the legislature. It's politics in 2024. There's always going to be noise, you know, with social media and the ability for politicians to be able to communicate directly. You're always going to have that kind of noise. But you know, I try not to let it bother me. You know, and just say what are our principles? How do we help people? And by staying focused on that, I think the GA is going to age very well. I think the time will look very kindly on what we've done.
We were doing these year-end interviews with you and House Minority Leader Allison Russo separately, same as last year. You were elected Speaker with the help of House Democrats. So what has your relationship been like with Democrats and with Leader Russo?
You know, I think it's been really good. We've, you know, I said there at the end of the lame duck, you know, we were a very conservative Republican caucus, but we also listen to our friends on the other side of the aisle. And when there are times when our interests align or we have things that we agree with, it's okay to do that. And the only way you're going to know if you agree with the other side is if you have conversations. And, you know, a lot of, you know, just from a regional standpoint, you know, me being from Appalachia, you know, some of the social economic problems that we have in rural Ohio and Appalachian Ohio is very similar to our urban friends. Our poverty is a little more spread out, but we have a lot of similarities, and you find those similarities by having those conversations and talking to people who are from a different background, and you can actually get a lot more done that way. But it doesn't mean you have to compromise your principles either, and I think that's what we've been able to show.
And finally, real quickly, you won't be Speaker as you decided not to run again, but you will be a House GOP caucus member.
Yes.
Will that be strange?
Oh, I think it'll be fun. You know,
Fun?
Well, you know, having sat in the chair, you know, there's not been very many people who've been Speaker of the House and had that honor, and it's been you know, life-changing and a wonderful experience. But you know, I am looking forward to, you know, representing my district. You know, I love our counties and love our people there, but also doing it with a perspective to understand that there's a lot of things that come into play when it comes into leadership and what bills get on the floor and all that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to being a productive member and, you know, standing for what I believe in, and you know, trying to help people throughout the whole state and then, of course, our district.